It's 2006. At the time, I'm a high school teacher in a small ex-mining town in the north of England. It's lunchtime, and because it's raining heavily outside, in my classroom is sat a small group of students aged around 13, and I like these kids a lot. Being teenagers and being naturally curious about their teacher, they ask me where I live, and I tell them that I live in the nearest big city. Their eyes light up. They ask me what this city's like, what it's like to live there. They speak of it as if it's a far-off, magical place. It was just a 20-minute drive away, but their worlds were so small that it may as well have been New York or San Francisco. We then get onto the topic of the future. I asked them what they'd like to be when they're older, and when they answered, my heart sank. The first boy, a bright, caring kid called Josh, he tells me that he'll probably end up on welfare, just like his parents. Many others tell me that they actually hope to be on welfare when they're older. The rest, they had their sights set on low-paying local service jobs. Many of the boys wanted to be taxi drivers. Many of the girls wanted to be hairstylists. You see, they'd grown up in a town that had been left behind and forgotten. Industry had moved on and evolved, things had changed, progress had happened, and in the 1980s, their parents and grandparents had been laid off from the coal mines, and many of them had not found new work. And with the kids in front of me, that cycle was set to continue. When these kids looked around them, all they saw was a world where the only possibilities were to be a hairdresser, be a taxi driver, or to be on welfare. And it was the limit of all they thought they could achieve. That conversation, that lunchtime, really stuck with me. 10 years later, I live in a very different world. I live in San Francisco, work for a large technology company. Back then, I was surrounded by the past and the people held back by it. But today, I'm surrounded by the future and the people who are helping to build it. And I'm here today, having lived in and experienced both of these worlds. That rainy classroom at lunchtime 10 years ago. And today, living in Silicon Valley and helping to build the future, to talk about how critical it is that we willfully set out to create a future that works for everybody. Now, it sure is an exciting time today. Shopping malls are closing and being replaced by slick smartphone apps. Farmers are using drones and sensors and artificial intelligence to increase their crop yields. Hailing a taxi in the street kind of feels like a relic from a bygone era all of a sudden. And especially in San Francisco, autonomous vehicles are actually starting to roam our streets. You see lots of these around. It's an interesting time because every industry right now is being transformed forever by technology. And every company, whatever its focus, will soon be a technology company at its core. And in the coming years, whole new industries are going to be spawned that we can't even imagine yet. Many of today's jobs will disappear or will be changed beyond recognition by these forces. And of course, many new jobs will emerge, but they're going to look very different and they're going to require very different sets of skills from the jobs of today. Industry is reinventing itself, and so too must those seeking work and opportunity and stability. But as those kids and their grandparents and parents knew, when progress happens, when things change, when industry shifts, people and areas can get left behind. And as the world moves ahead at this rapid pace, we're at greater risk than ever before of leaving whole sections of the population, whole areas behind. And with recent political history in mind, it is sobering to imagine how even deeper divisions, how an even bigger gap will affect our country, our communities, and our world. In this new economy, many people are left wondering, what is my place? And the answer, all too often, is that you don't have one. What we want instead is a world where, instead of leaving people behind, technology brings people along for the ride, where it enables them and allows them to fulfill their potential. When I think back to those students, what strikes me most is the amount of unfulfilled potential they represented. Smart, bright, creative kids with so much to offer the world, potential that was hidden in plain sight, and potential that was destined to go untapped. But we know from history that when we can unlock human potential, when we can unleash untapped pools of talent, it results in broad increases in productivity and quality of life. Because in a knowledge, services, and information economy, this is where growth comes from: technology plus human potential. So how can we build this future? What do? Well, it's a really difficult problem with lots of moving parts, and it's difficult to tackle this in a 15-minute talk. But I wanted to cover some things today I think we can start doing to start working towards this future. First, we need to find and enable and embrace new ways of working. You see, the way that we work today hasn't really changed in a long time, and it's really a hangover from a bygone era. A past where we used to drive to a physical office 9 to 5, where paper correspondence arrived at our desks every day, where the landline telephone was our main connection to the world, and where collaboration and connection mainly took place at the local level, and none of this is true today. And our ability to contribute and connect and collaborate remotely has reached new heights. And the world's largest technology companies like Facebook and Google and Microsoft today are working on amazing new technologies that are going to make this even more immersive. What you're seeing here is Facebook's virtual meeting space. I've had a chance to try this on, and when you put the headset on, your brain believes you're in the room with other people. It's amazing. And Facebook actually did an early test, but they had a bug in the software. When people landed in this space, their hands were actually connected to each other. And so people would put the headset on and land in this space, and suddenly they'd be face-to-face with somebody else with their hands connected to them. And they noticed that it actually caused them to blush in real life. Their brains believe they're in the space. So if you get a chance to try this, I'd encourage you to. And soon you'll be able to strap on a $200 headset and be in the same space with other people. And I think if companies embrace this kind of technology and put new platforms and procedures and hiring processes in place, it can really start to reverse the trends that we're seeing of opportunity being concentrated in just a handful of metro areas. It's really cool. And we know that for every good job that we can keep in the local economy, rather than moving to one of those metro areas, it actually has a multiplier effect over time, creating additional jobs in the local economy. Next, and this is so important to me as a former teacher, we really need to find and develop and fully embrace new ways of learning. It used to be that you could develop a very specific set of skills early in your life. You could get a degree, a diploma, a certificate, and then pretty much rely on that skill set for the rest of your life until retirement. And of course, those days are now gone. And the credentials of yesterday are really holding us back in so many ways. The opportunity they provide just doesn't scale. And often they just exacerbate and multiply already deep divisions in opportunity. Students leaving school today will also have 5 or more distinct careers throughout their lives, and reinvention is really the new normal. These kids are going to have to reinvent themselves throughout their lives and pick up new skills aligned with the needs of industry. And we need education systems that allow them to do this. This is also the case for older workers that may be displaced from their jobs today by automation, and perhaps for the first time in their working lives, they're going to have to reinvent themselves too. They're going to have to learn entirely new sets of skills in order to continue supporting their families. We need employers to start looking at the workforce today, start identifying sections of their working population that might be affected by automation in the future, and to start proactively helping them to develop future-proof skills that align with their future needs and the future needs of industry as well. And this is in the interests of all of us. But of course today, anybody can learn skills with a smartphone or a tablet, and that's really amazing. And with the new technologies like virtual reality, this learning is going to become even more immersive and engaging and accessible at low cost. But it's often not given as much currency as more traditional forms of learning, and we need to turn that around. We need employers to start giving this informal and technology-based learning more currency, because it's much more scalable. And the best thing our schools can do is to ignite a lifelong love of learning in students that's going to see them through this lifetime of change and disruption and reinvention. But none of this matters if your world is so small that you don't believe there's anything out there for you. If you're a high school student leaving school in a small rural town or in a distressed urban community, if you're a person who's been displaced from their job by automation, if you don't believe in your heart that you're worthy and capable of making a contribution, and if you believe the opportunity is for other people in faraway cities and not people like you, then all the work and learning opportunities in the world won't make any difference. And there's something we can all do to help. Many of the people in this audience and watching this talk came from communities where opportunity wasn't widespread, communities that are at risk of being chained to the past. If this is you, I believe that we have a responsibility to go back into our communities, to connect with people, to mentor people, to help light a path to opportunity for people who may not be able to see it today. If you think back, there was probably somebody in your past that did this for you, and now is the time to be that person for others. I'd like to see, and I really believe that we can build, a world where in the future, when a teacher sits down with some students on a rainy lunchtime in a classroom and asks them what they'd like to be when they're older, that teacher gets a very different response than I did 10 years ago. A world where students' futures are full of excitement and abundance and opportunity, where they're in love with learning and they know how to use tools that are going to let them redevelop their skills over their lifetimes, where they know there are good jobs they can get right where they are. I believe we can build that world, and you can all be a part of it. Thank you.